Today's story is titled One Way to Mars by Aspiring to Be Anything. The link to the story is in the description below. Please enjoy. It's been 2 months on this rust bucket luxury starliner, and I haven't had a decent night's sleep. The rattle and hum of the ship shaking apart kept me awake for 2 reasons. First, it was loud, and second, I didn't want to die here. I agreed to work on the ship for passage to the US Mars settlement. I could either pay $2 million to travel in one of those cryo chambers, or work on the ship for 9 months to end up on Mars with a sizable chunk of change. I needed a new life. I owed money back home to some back alley butchers that do cybernetic augmentations, that sell good organs, appendages, whatever on the back end. Well, I sold them some bad joint rotors for a quick buck, and now I'm here turning a wrench and babysitting rich popsicles for 7 more months. It's not all bad. They don't complain much, and maybe I'll be like them if I ever return. The day starts the same every day. I open my eyes to the ceiling a few inches from my face and jump down from the top bunk. Frost clings to every edge it can find. I grab my maintenance jumpsuit and my coat and head to what some might call the cafeteria. It was nothing more than a nutrient sludge dispenser and a couple of aluminum picnic tables. The food was cold. The bench was cold. Every square inch of this dump was cold. Wake up on the wrong side of the bed again, Mason? Every morning until I'm out of here. Michael was the only one I would consider a friend on this ship. He wasn't friendly, but he was the only one that didn't seem like they were actively scheming. No one shared anything about themselves. We all had our reasons for taking this job, and we all knew none of our reasons would matter when we finally got to Mars. We wouldn't even need to do this if the jackasses in those pods actually gave a damn about the poor, he mused. $2 million each for 250 people. You know that's $500 million every 9 months just flying back and forth? And this isn't the only ship either. That's probably why they can afford to pay us at the end of this trip, I retorted. Would you be on this flying junk heap if we wouldn't get a huge pile of cash and be where no one knew us? He sat dejected, just staring at his nutrient paste for a moment before saying, Maybe I wouldn't need the money or a new life if I had a decent existence down on Earth. I quickly finished my meal and went to work. My job was electrical maintenance, and the ship must have rats running through it with all the work I end up with. I'm constantly running down wires to see why this, that, or the other isn't properly powered. The only thing that works with any consistency is the cryo chambers. It must be really nice to sleep on Earth and waking up on Mars. I like to think that maybe they're visiting friends or family, or that they also want to start a new life. I just knew I'd rather be in there than out here. Lunch was the same as breakfast. I sat quietly alone with my thoughts in the cafeteria. Then suddenly, I was knocked to the floor by a great jolt. The metal of the ship groaned as it resisted bending and breaking. Asteroids. Another collision shook the ship with great force. The status alarm began its long droning. The fluorescent lights flickered off, leaving nothing but the blue emergency lights to illuminate the cafeteria. I quickly scrambled to my feet and sprinted to the command center. The one bit of training we received before boarding was what to do in emergency situations. As I got to the command center, I noticed no one was dashing around to their stations. I walked to Chris, the person the company put in charge of the ship, and asked what was going on.
Looks like we took a couple of asteroids to the starboard side. Nothing crazy. The assessment team should be back in a minute with a full breakdown.
Is there anything I need to do?
Yeah. Go check the breakers and get the lights back on. These blue emergency lights freak me out, he admitted. Why are they blue and not red?
Maybe the blue lights were cheaper, I joked as I headed for the breakers. I didn't mind going to the breaker room. I got to pass through the cryo atrium, wall to wall with the cryo chambers. The dim blue light from the tubes illuminated the silhouettes of the occupants. Hundreds of lives suspended with strangers watching over them. I always stopped by one chamber in particular. It was a young girl, dressed in a beautiful cotton dress, gold adornments around her neck and wrists, a small doll at her side like a sentry watching over her. She couldn't have been more than 10 years old. She reminded me of my Anna the last time I saw my sweet girl. Cold, pallid, and in a container just big enough. Perhaps if I had the money, I could have gotten her a real surgeon to take the tumor out. I don't feel bad for selling those bad rotors to those hacks after what they had done. They owed me. The breaker room was a lot simpler. Just a simple desk console with some switches. There was also a solid lead wall to try to prevent the radiation from the ship's reactor from bleeding out to the occupants. I doubt anyone ever knows if it works. I reset the breakers and the lights flickered back to life. I started back towards the command center. The assessment team was giving their full report as I walked in. There was a heaviness to the air. Worried faces littered the room. Even the normally stoic Chris was sullen with concern. I sneak in the back of the crowd as the report wraps up.
So essentially, the cargo bay was struck by an asteroid, breaching the hull. The section of the ship has been closed off, and the ship can continue its voyage. However, much of our supplies were in the cargo bay. We estimate we have roughly a day left of food. Essentially whatever we had prepped in the kitchen.
Multiple voices started to flood the forum. Cries of what are we supposed to do and how could this happen? Until Chris took control of the situation again.
What about the hydroponic planters? The advanced food growth systems? This is what they were installed for.
Unfortunately, the hydroponic system and its subsystems were installed near the cargo bay. When the asteroid breached the hull, the systems were sucked out.
Of course, all of our food stored in one place.
One of the crew members interjected sarcastically.
This company thought of everything.
So what do we do?
Another crew member asked. Panic slowly snaked through the crowd. The low hum of talking grew into a cacophony of frantic yelling.
Quiet!
Chris' voice echoed through the command center.
Did anyone pack food? We should pull together our resources to see where we're at.
Everyone scurried off to their personal areas to search for food. When we reconvened in the command center, there was nothing but a paltry pile of candy bars, trail mix, and other snacks, hardly worth the effort it took to scrounge it up. Chris looked dismayed. We added maybe a day to our remaining food supply, if we were lucky. Maybe he was hoping a bunch of poor saps would be secretly hiding 7 months' worth of food.
We'll start rationing then. Assessment team, start working on calculations to get our current supply to last as long as possible. We'll do sleep rotations if we have to in order to cut down on calorie use and consumption.
The little nerds started ticking away at their computers, trying to find the exact least amount to feed all of us and suffer minimal casualties to still sustain operations, I'm sure. I find Chris as the crowd dissipates, and I ask him what he's thinking.
I don't know. I just wish I was in one of those chambers right now.
I head back to my sleeping area and wait for an alert to go do my job. Just staring up at the ceiling that now feels oddly comforting with its closeness. Michael pops his head up to my bunk.
How you doing? You feeling all right?
As well as I can, I suppose.
Ain't this just how it goes, though? Every time you try to better yourself, life just throws you another curveball. You think they'll figure out what to do?
I hope they do. If only there were some extra chambers. Then we could free some of the crew and leave their rations for the absolutely essential crew. Michael stared at me for a moment. His gaze felt heavy on the side of my face. I could feel gears turning in his head.
That's not a half bad idea. If only there were open chambers.
Michael slunk away to somewhere. I don't care where he went, as long as it was somewhere away from me. I must have fallen asleep as I awoke to commotion. A fight had broken out in the cafeteria. I hurried over to watch. That's when I noticed the poor sod getting the snot beat out of him was Michael. I stepped in to break up the fight.
Alright, show's over. You taught him a lesson. Now let him go.
The lumbering duct worker dropped the collar of Michael's coveralls and stepped back. I hurried to Michael's side as he began to raise himself up. "What came out of your mouth this time to deserve that?" "Ah, you know me. I have a way with words that really get the people going." "Look, man, things are tense enough as it is. You don't need to make it worse by riling anyone up." "Why do you always assume it's my fault?" "Because it usually is. Seriously, what did you say?" "I suggested that maybe we wake a couple passengers up and let them deal with this mess instead of us." Michael's opponent shouted,
"You're just trying to mess this up for us. All we have to do is figure this out, and we can all have our new lives on Mars."
"So why did you hit him?" I asked. "I may have insulted his intelligence after," Michael murmured.
"Don't ever call me a one-brain cell amoeba again, or we'll find out how many brain cells you got, because we'll be able to count them on the wall."
"I think we need to get Chris involved. He's the one in charge. We'll let him decide what we're doing," I said with finality. Chris was summoned to the cafeteria, where lines were already being drawn by hushed voices.
"What's going on?"
Chris said sternly. "Everyone is concerned about what we're going to do. They're worried we don't have a lot of options," I said. Michael then chimed in from across the room. "There's options. It's just some people don't want to hear about them." People began shouting obscenities and arguing. Again, Chris quieted the crowd.
"So what is this grandiose idea that is worth all this shouting?"
Chris asked. Michael piped up again. "Look, the idea is simple. We wake a couple of the frozen guys up, and we put the crew in the chambers."
"What would be the point of that? We then would have the same number of people to take care of. That doesn't really solve the problem."
"It would get us to Mars." Chris thought for a moment.
"We can't have a whole maintenance crew comprised of inexperienced randoms. The ship would never make it to Mars. Plus, even if they could operate the ship, what stops them from killing you in the chamber and then refreezing themselves?"
A low rumble of murmurs grew as the debate hung in the air. Someone in the crowd shouted,
"What if we killed them and took their chambers?"
I shouted immediately, "That's murder! We can't do that!" "Why not? We'll starve to death if we don't," Michael said with earnest sincerity. "Because that's not who we are. There's gotta be another way," I pleaded as I looked to Chris. Chris looked deep in thought. He wasn't seriously considering this, was he?
"Hypothetically," Chris started, "if we were to consider taking chambers, what do we do about the maintenance of the ship? We would need crew to stay unfrozen to ensure we arrive at Mars, but they would need to eat."
No one spoke. No one needed to. In that moment, the nerd spokesperson came to speak to Chris.
Is this a bad time, sir? We need to go over the food situation with you."
"You may as well say it now,"
Chris said, thankful that the current conversation was on hold.
"I don't think I should say it to everyone, sir."
"Say it."
"Well, there's currently no solution to the food dilemma that gets us the remaining 7 months. The numbers just don't work out."
"So, is that it then? We're just gonna become a bunch of monsters?" I shouted. In that moment, I saw the gears settle in Chris's mind.
"My job is the survival of the crew and the ship itself. We need to consider all options. What else are we supposed to do?"
Chris asked. I don't know. We could think of something." "What? You're the one suggesting another course of action. You think of something," Michael interjected. I racked my brain, grasping for anything. "Maybe we could soak some leather shoes and eat those," the spokesperson calmly said.
"Not enough calories."
"So now all we're worried about is calories. What about our humanity? What about them? They're somebody's mother, somebody's son, somebody's little girl," I pleaded.
"Aren't we too?"
Somebody offered. I could feel the group of people behind me slowly shrink until I stood alone.
"Mason," Michael said gingerly, "we don't have a choice. It's us or them. If it was us in there and them out here, how long do you think they'd spend worrying about humanity?"
I stood there looking at the faces of my crewmates. I began to see that I had lost the debate long ago, maybe even before we boarded the ship. "I need to take a walk," I said quietly, turning away. As I left the room, the rest of the crew turned in and started discussing the logistics of their sustenance plan. Deep in thought, I entered the cryoatrium. I stopped to study the faces of the people in each chamber, soaking in the vast pool of human experience. They probably had loving, doting parents who were so excited when they took their first steps, who cradled them through the sleepless nights, telling them it'll all be okay. Parents who would have done anything to keep them safe. These people were loved. I stood before the little girl again, her face blurred behind my tears. "I'm sorry, Anna,"